Good day, viewing audience, and welcome back to Liv-In-Room and episode 2 of series 1, the Electoral College Decoded, the 2016 theatrical presidential election to the 2017 theatrical presidential inauguration. It's your girl, Freelance. Can it be I stayed away too long? Did I leave your mind when I was gone? Just kidding with you a little bit. All jokes aside, though, it's been about 5 weeks since I last recorded, and this day I plan on delivering the information I promised I would. So, without further ado, let's get down to business. First up on our agenda, exactly who and what is the Electoral College? What is their function, and how are they selected, and who qualifies? Well, any one person aside from Congress holding offices of trust or profit under the Constitution can serve as elector, which in layman's terms means the electors cannot receive wages or benefits from the government. This is to ensure the integrity of the presidential election process. Now, electors are typically selected by political parties in each state. The political parties usually nominate slates of potential electors, or they choose them by vote of the party's central committee. Now, when the general public cast their votes on Tuesday after the first Monday in November for their presidential nominations, they're not really voting for the president. They're voting for electors. So now you can easily understand how even though Hillary won the popular vote, she did not win the election. It all depends on how many electors each one state has to get the win. The Constitution assigns each state a number of electors equivalent to the total of the state's Senate and House of Representative delegates. As of this 2016 election, a state could have had anywhere between 3 and 54 electors. A majority of 270 of the 538 Electoral College votes are needed to constitute a win, and Trump beat Hillary in both the November 8th, December 19th, and the final Joe Biden tally on the 16th of January. It has been a common school of thought to assume that as long as a presidential candidate wins both California and New York, they win the election. However, we have to start taking into consideration states like Texas, Ohio, and the swing state of Florida, because Trump won these states, and Trump won the majority of Electoral College votes. So we have to get off this notion that California and New York determine everything. We have to really come to grips and come to terms with the fact that Donald Trump is the 45th president of the United States. And we really need to be more informed, be more proactive, and do what we can within our local governments to influence state and federal government. I'd like to move on to Part B of the questions I raised in the first episode, which is who actually created this Electoral College presidential candidate selection process and why? Well, the answer to the who would be this country's founding fathers. At the Constitution Convention of 1787, this nation's founding fathers met to figure out the most diplomatic way to select this nation's presidents. They did not want a king, a monarch, a dictator. They did not want one person to hold the key and the power to the way in which this country on a whole was going to move. They wanted to make sure that power switched hands, and that power to delegate responsibilities to the other branches of government switched hands, so that that power in essence would remain in the hands of the general public. Now, the Committee of 11 on Postponed Matters created the Electoral College system, which takes us to the why answered part of the question. The Electoral College system was created to take the presidential candidate selection completely out of the hands of Congress and keep the process from being tainted with political corruption. You can look into the United States Constitution, Article 2, Section 1 for more details as to how each state and political parties can select their electors. But after electors gather in their designated states on Monday after the second Wednesday in December, which so happened to be this past December 19, 2016, they cast separate ballots, which should not vary from what the populace in their state wants, but they cast separate ballots for president and vice president candidates. And after their final votes, the Electoral College ceases to exist for another 4 years. So when you look objectively, when you objectively view the system this nation's founding fathers put in place to keep the selection of the commander-in-chief from being manipulated, you can see how from the hierarchy down of government, the nomination is, albeit tamper-proof, but from grassroots up, there has been tampering from both sides of the political party fences. And if you are paying attention to mainstream media, they believe there has also been tampering from outside foreign entities. What I would like to do is to show you a nice video and article snapshot collage we put together for you of the different shenanigans both parties and outside parties are alleged to have done to sway this particular presidential election in either direction. Take a look at these clips.
So this one came in a day before the election. Hey, blankhead, I'll find you and put a bullet in your fat, blanking mouth.
Death threats fill Michigan elector Michael Banarian's social media accounts.
So this is a tweet I received, has a picture of a noose on it.
His mailbox packed with demands coming from around the country. 2,000 just this week, he says.
Oregon, Oklahoma, Washington State.
I am so sorry. The mailman even interrupting our interview to deliver another 600 letters, all calling on him not to vote for Donald Trump. Something Banarian, along with Michigan's 15 other electors, pledged to do, regardless of the pressures.
I've had death wishes, people just saying, I hope you die, do society a favor, throw yourself in front of a bus. And just recently I was reading a blog about me, and unfortunately these people not only called for the burning of myself, but my family, which is completely out of line.
Banarian has no choice. Michigan state law keeps him from changing his vote. Electors in 27 other states and the District of Columbia also have what are known as faithless elector laws. But in 22 states, electors can go rogue. Anti-Trump groups are not letting up, posting the names and addresses of 283 electors on the internet, encouraging people across the country to write the electors asking they vote against Trump.
I believe I must cast my vote for an alternative Republican.
The group, Hamilton Electors, is leading the charge to block Trump from 270 electoral votes. They say at least 20 electors are on board, but they need 37 for the election to go to the House of Representatives.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you.
Hollywood stars are pushing for an alternate ending as well, releasing this video.
By voting your conscience, you and other brave Republican electors can give the House of Representatives the option to select a qualified candidate.
But that's never happened before. And Benarian says his vote won't help this year be the first.
It's utter hypocrisy because I don't think that if the roles were reversed, most of these people would be okay with electors being faithless and voting for anyone other than Hillary Clinton had she won.
In 2008, Jack Hawk, the former chair of the North Carolina Republican Party, wrote that something had to be done about the students and black voters whose unprecedented turnout had turned the state blue for the first time in 32 years. The alternative, Hawk wrote, was that the country would, quote, continue to slide towards socialism, end quote. That something turned out to be a notorious law, better known to its detractors as the Monster Law, passed by a Republican majority state legislature in 2013. The legislation gutted many of the progressive voting rules that had contributed to Obama's razor-thin margin in the state: same-day registration, a lengthy early voting period, and out-of-precinct voting by provisional ballot, all favored disproportionately by African-American voters and students. But now that argument has come crashing down, following a flurry of remarkable court rulings over the past 2 weeks, accusing North Carolina and 3 other Republican-run states, Wisconsin, Kansas, and Texas, of violating the 1965 Voting Rights Act and intentionally discriminating against African Americans and other classes of voters.
The Democratic National Committee is suing the RNC for aiding in voter intimidation. Republican candidate Donald Trump has been encouraging supporters over the past month to watch the polls in certain areas, which may have been interpreted as a call for minority voter intimidation. In 1982, a federal decree was passed which limits the powers of the RNC at polls. In the lawsuit passed down on Wednesday, the DNC claims that the terms of that federal decree have been violated with Trump's rhetoric.
So, even after all the lawsuits the DNC filed against the Republican Party for voter intimidation, Donald Trump still won. And remember when we spoke about the settlement for Trump University and the child rape assault allegation case, and we wondered if he would be impeached because of these issues? Congress could actually move to impeach him under Article 2 of the United States Constitution, which reserves impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanors. And the Constitution does not prohibit Congress from impeaching a president for alleged acts that happened prior to him taking office. But according to a law professor by the name of Christopher Lewis Peterson, impeachment may be an issue, even though this particular professor believes Donald Trump should be impeached. Christopher Lewis Peterson is a law professor, once again, at the University of Utah. And he states, once again, it could be proper for Congress to impeach Trump. Now, the details as to why can be read in a 23-page article Peterson wrote September 20th of 2016. I'll place the link to that report, that article, in the description box. But I'd like to point out a very valid point Professor Peterson made in his article. Once again, the article was written before the November 8th ballots were cast. Professor Peterson eloquently articulated that if Trump wins, Congress could see his win as a green light okay on his conduct and as the American public's co-signment on the legitimacy of his presidency and ability to perform his duties with integrity. After all, America elected him knowing there were rape of a minor allegations brewing. They elected him even with audio surfacing about him inappropriately grabbing women in private parts, him walking in on minor females during pageantry contests while they're in their changing rooms, changing, and also with the fraud and racketeering charges against him for his university. So I ask you, public, with Republicans in control of the House and Senate, do you think an impeachment is possible this early in the game? You can read about Trump's $25 million Trump University settlement at fortune.com, but just so you don't have to go search crazy, I'll also put that link in the description box. And Snopes covered the burial of the child rape allegations, their resurfacing, and then the recent dropping of these allegations again this past November. I'll also put that link in the description box for you to read as well. Now, there's been a media frenzy occurring throughout January 20th, 2017 with Trump inauguration, from Women's March on Washington all over the country and throughout the world. Trump's Secretary of Press slamming mainstream media for coverage of inauguration turnout. Trump addressing the CIA. His private conversations with Netanyahu after UN's disapproval of expanding Israeli settlements into Palestine. Trump's first executive orders he signed. I could go on and on, but instead of doing that, we've created another news, video, and article snap collage of what's transpiring in light of Trump's transition into office. Take a look at these clips. I'd like Joy Reid and Dick Gregory to give us some perspective as to what we've won with this presidential election and where we as a nation seem to be heading the next 4 years. Next time we broach the topic of government and politics, we'll dig into the establishment of this great nation, and I'd also like to take a closer look at Trump's cabinet. Stay tuned. Episode 3 soon will be posted. This is Freelance signing out. Peace and blessings.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to AM Joy. Well, we had an election, and basically everyone who predicted what the outcome was going to be was wrong, me included. So long, white whale, old friend. So Republicans, Donald Trump, congratulations. You won the White House. Yes, Hillary Clinton won about 500,000 more votes, but he won more electors. And that means that according to the U.S. Constitution, once the Electoral College meets and votes, Donald Trump is going to officially be the president-elect. Let that sink in, America. This guy is going to be the president of the United States and the face of the country to the world.
Automatically attracted to beautiful.
just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just I don't even know. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the
Great job, America. So now, to the 60,265,858 people who voted for Donald Trump, and the nearly 100 million people who didn't bother to vote at all, even though you were eligible, we here at AM Joy are going to tell you what you've won. Donald Trump now heads the Republican Party, which controls all three branches of government. They control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And the Supreme Court is poised to be filled by the new Republican president. Now, you've given Trump a man alternately described as vengeful, erratic, narcissistic, dangerous, and temperamentally unfit to be president, and that's just what conservative Republicans said about him. You've given him control of the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the IRS. Pretty ironic, since he probably hasn't paid taxes in 18 years, not to mention drones and nuclear weapons. Politically, Republicans no longer have any excuse to not do the things that they've been promising their voters for decades. And Trump has no excuse for not doing the things he promised during his campaign. And that means that once he gets to Washington, Trump will have to get really busy. He's promised to build a wall across the southern border. Now, that's going to require an appropriation from the Republican Congress. And why wouldn't they do it? I mean, you wouldn't want Trump voters punishing you in 2018 in the midterms for not keeping your promises, right? Mexico paying for it is not going to happen. So, America, if this wall is going to get built, you are going to have to pay for it. Trump has promised to cancel DACA, meaning 728,000 young people who have identified themselves to the federal government under the protection of President Obama will be at immediate risk of deportation once Trump takes office. Congress doesn't have to lift a finger to make this happen. Trump can simply rescind President Obama's executive orders and start the deportations through ICE, which he will control. And also through local police departments, some of whom have been quite enthusiastic about his candidacy. Trump has vowed to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something terrific. That means the Republican Congress will need to either pass a new repeal bill or simply send one of the 50-plus repeal bills already passed in the House to the Republican-controlled Senate and then to Trump's desk. To prevent Democrats from filibustering, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell can simply end the filibuster on the first day of the new Congress. Once the repeal is signed, what happens next is that 22 million of you, presumably many who voted for Donald Trump, will lose your insurance. That number could go even higher because now Trump is saying he'll keep a provision of the law that left by itself could force insurance companies out of business. We'll have more on that later in the show. Trump has also vowed to institute a ban on any new Muslim immigration to the U.S. and even Muslim tourism to the U.S. Now, if you're in a state with a large tourist economy like Florida, you might want to start thinking about what that means to your state's bottom line, since Middle Eastern, Asian, European, and other international tourists offended by this idea might also rethink a visit to the United States in the Trump era. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court will now have an open lane to overturn Roe v. Wade, meaning women may soon be refighting issues of legalized abortion and maybe even contraception state by state. For Black Lives Matter activists and anyone who valued the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department as the protector of voting rights, prepare to face Giuliani time. Unless, of course, Rudy becomes Secretary of State instead of Attorney General, as the rumor mill suggests he prefers. And then, hello world! He could be joined in the cabinet by Pitchfork Sheriff David Clark as head of the Department of Homeland Security. That would be interesting. And that's not to mention foreign policy, where a pro-Putin administration in the U.S., with a pro-Putin administration in the U.S., a woman is now leader of the free world. No, not that woman. This woman, Germany's Angela Merkel. She is now all that stands between Russia and its global ambitions, and we'll explain that in a bit. So now that I've told you what you've won, Trump America, allow me to tell you what you've lost. You've lost the morality card. No longer can the U.S. go around lecturing the world about democracy, because in our democracy, the person who got the most votes will not become the president. For the second time in the last 3 Republican presidential victories. Nor will the party that got the most votes control the House of Representatives. Again, we're required to accept this affront to democracy because that's our system. But our acceptance doesn't make it any less undemocratic. And hey, maybe it's a good thing that we can no longer go around the world lecturing them about how to live. You've also lost the notion of an exceptional America, because as it turns out, we're just another Western nation falling to the ethno-nationalist forces sweeping across Europe, from Brexit in the UK to France's Marine Le Pen. fueled and egged on by the Russians and feeding on the fear of non-white and non-Christian immigrants. We, as it turns out, are not so different after all. You've also lost the right to moralize to Blue America about family values. And we sincerely hope and pray that your daughters and your sisters and your wives and all women and girls are never disrespected, never abused the way the next president of the United States has boasted about disrespecting and even sexually assaulting women, including walking in on teenage pageant contestants while they're naked. When your sons and daughters ask you if little girls are as valuable as little boys, or if they should emulate the President of the United States, we'll leave that to you to explain. And lastly, you've lost the right to rattle on about the party of Lincoln and Reagan. You are now the party of Donald Trump, the party of the alt-right, of Breitbart.com. You've ratified Trump's vulgarity, his crassness. You saw exactly who and what he was, and you chose it. You're going to have to own that. If the incoming president makes you feel proud, I'm very happy for you. But please don't tell the people who are afraid that they have no right to be. And to my friends in the media who are rushing to normalize Trump, who are blithely calling on parents and teachers of scared Latino and Muslim kids and little girls and boys of color to come together and accept what's happening, while Trump ushers in an emboldened KKK and an alt-right that will soon have a place in the White House. Let's remember that nothing at all has changed about Donald Trump. Nothing. He's still the same historically unpopular person who's under criminal investigation over Trump University, whose foundation was revealed to be a sham of self-dealing, whose campaign, the Washington Post reports, was in direct contact with Russian authorities, and who's in unknown amounts of debt to unknown foreign entities in a way we've never seen in a president. He's still the guy who's made racist, misogynistic statements that have offended virtually every group in the U.S. He's still the guy who said this.
Automatically attracted to beautiful. I just think it's like a magnet. You just I don't even do it. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Whatever you want. Grab them by the
We owe it to the country to cover him with clear, open eyes. This isn't about access or normalized, homogenized politics or the pageantry of succession. We need to cover the next president with the same cynicism that the current president was treated to, and with the same zeal and skepticism and doggedness that we expended on, Hillary's emails. Given how unprecedented what is happening is, including his veiled and not so veiled threats against the First Amendment, maybe we need to cover him with more toughness and skepticism. And when we come back, we're going to start with what Trump will, won't, can, and can't do to Obamacare.